What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with reactions to the classics. And today we got a top 10 new songs on live albums. It's actually a top 10 plus one, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Joseph. Thank you, Joseph. Always appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons that make this thing go. You guys hear me say that all the time, but this channel doesn't exist without the patrons. This channel takes an enormous amount of time. So if you'd like to support us in any way at all, check out the Patreon link below or the Patreon link on the end screen. We greatly appreciate it. Joseph says this isn't a ranked numbered list, nor is it an exhaustive one. I've just selected songs I like or that are interesting in some way, but nor is it random. We start with a live album opener, have a couple more live tracks before a mid-list run of studio tracks, and then close with a few more live tracks, ending on a live album closer. I've only selected songs that came from releases specifically marketed as live albums. So nothing from the various half live, half studio hybrids that are out there, and also ruled out the handful of albums I can name that are live, but all new material. So Running on Empty and Uncle Neil's Time Fades Away and Rust Never Sleeps, basically. I've also avoided cover songs that could be a separate list for another year or not, all by itself. So if you've never joined us before, the music will not be up in the video, but it will be at a Vimeo link below. Thank you again, Joseph. We'll start this list out with a guy who's not featured enough on this channel, the great Neil Diamond. The song Lordy from Gold in 1970. Joseph says we kick off with a familiar artist to most, but with a track that might catch a few people off guard. His live album from 1972, Hot August Night, copies of which seemingly came with your birth certificate if growing up in New Zealand or Australia in the 70s and 80s, saw Neil backed by a 7-piece band and orchestra before an audience of thousands. But this earlier album, and what a difference a couple of years can make, really marked the end of the first and, in my opinion, best phase of his career, and sees him instead in a small packed club and legendary one as a troubadour, with owner Doug Weston introducing him at the beginning, backed by only a 3-piece band, plus backing singers, and is less showy and a lot rawer. Never more so than on this track. The back cover contained a quote from Cash Boss magazine that seemed fitting. On stage, Diamond radiates the same excitement that has made pop stars from Sinatra to Presley, and it's a sensation that can't be described, only felt. I'm not sure if Neil ever attempted a studio version of this, but it was his regular stage opener for a year or two around this time. And I mean, I grew up in a family that didn't really listen to a lot of music. My dad, not at all, but he was hardly ever around. But my mom basically was Elvis, Barry Manilow, and this man right here, Neil Diamond. I've never heard this. She was more a jazz singer type Neil Diamond. So I'll have the lyrics up as always. Let's check it out. Lordy, Mr. Neil Diamond. You definitely could feel the rawness and the energy of it. I see exactly what Joseph's talking about. A fine song. I mean, I don't love it, but I love hearing Neil like this, right? I mean, very underrated in the annals of music history now, the farther away we get from his peak. Just a guy I don't ever hear really brought up. It's so good. Such a good songwriter as well, just throughout his time. But, you know, I mean, basically the song's just about, you know, this girl's, she's kind of screwing him over, right? He's got some great lines in here. But, yeah, man. Really enjoyed that, and I'll have to listen to it in a different version when everyone's there. But the showy Neil was fine. It was great. People loved it. He made a lot of money. People still line up for concert tickets for it. I get that totally. Not throwing that down at all. But yeah, this rawness of him is quite nice. Now we'll go to a group I'm not real familiar with. Caravan, Virgin on the Ridiculous. See what I did there from Caravan in the new Symphonia in 1974. Joseph said Caravan were on tour promoting their For Girls Who Grow Plump in the Night album when they were informed by their record company management that they would do a concert and album with the orchestra who had performed on that album's closing track. Only catch? The concert was scheduled for 2 weeks' time, and they wanted 2 new songs for it. Guitarist vocalist Pi Hastings managed to provide this track, along with Mirror for the Day. In the case of the track, he only managed to finish the lyrics the morning of the concert. For both new songs, he had to use a music stand with lyrics for the performance, which is understandable, man. Neither of which perhaps rank as Caravan's finest, but nor do they belie the haste with which they were created. The concert and album were well received by press and fans alike, but Hastings called it a nerve-wracking experience. You can see why. Exasperated by the short rehearsal time, noting, quote, "We had only 2 4-hour sessions with the orchestra to rehearse all the material, once in the studio on the day before the concert, and once on the stage of the Theatre Royal on the afternoon of the performance. We had all kinds of problems. It was a very awkward concert to perform because we had to play behind the orchestra, and they sat in front of us. The string section were complaining that we were too loud, so we had to angle our amps up in the air to prevent the sound and volume from being directed straight at them. Wow, it sounds like they made something out of a very difficult situation. Not really familiar much with Caravan. Well, let's check it out. All right, Virgin on the ridiculous Caravan. I didn't forget the last minute of the song. Joseph said it's a spoken intro for the next song on this album. Quite the musical journey, lots of instrumentation, and they're kind of a, I don't know what kind of a nice dreamy feel to it, sort of. And the song itself, just, he wants to be with this other person, this girl, I'm assuming, and, they can be together. So living a life that you never know. Maybe one day will come to be a song and all the world will sing so big and beautiful. Never know what it is, but it goes on. So we're coming with you. We're coming back to fight again, back with our love for a place in your heart. And we'll be together. Never will sing the same again. Oh, how I love you. Now we're not apart. So it's more about the instrumentation, the overall vibe, but I thought the lyrics are fine, and I thought the vocals performed nicely. Next up, we have Foy Vance, a guy I know one song from, right? But it ain't this song. It's a more recent song. We got Concerning the Horizon from Live at Bangor Abbey in 2015. Joseph says there was a 6-year gap between Foy's first and second studio album, so he had amassed more material than was needed, leading to a gem like this being nixed from the final running order. But perhaps, as he alludes to in his introduction, it was fitting that it should make its debut on an album recorded live in his hometown. Truth be told, I prefer the live performances on this release to anything on the studio album anyway. So the last song, we cut off the last minute. This one, I'm actually going to go back to the song before this because it's a spoken intro for this song and then just let it run into this song. Concerning the Horizon, Foy Vance. A funny intro to that for sure. Beautiful song, man. So well done. Just talking about the dichotomy of him and this person that he's talking to. You hold up the walls, I walk the halls for days. You look across the water and the waves, and I walk home in the rain. You always said there was something funny about me. Why I often feel warm there, standing in the cold air with no path and no horizon. About as hard as it gets. Out there in the corner, I feel much like a foreigner. Though we spoke the same language and smoked the same cigarettes. You were always talking about fighting, and my eyes were always on the horizon. It ends much the same in the second verse, some repetition of the first verse. And I just thought it was really well done, really pretty, and an awesome vocal performance for a live performance. Next up, we have Seals and Crofts. Baby, I'll Give It To You from Sudan Village in 1976. Joseph said we move on to the studio portion of the list here, nice and subtly, because we get an a cappella opening with a hint of residual audience atmosphere over the opening 10 seconds or so. I've never been sure if it was intended to make the transition to a random studio track less jarring, or if they actually genuinely hoped people would be fooled into thinking this was also live. If so, the strings and horns are a dead giveaway, not to mention the fade-out ending. Yeah, that would be there. Very odd. But that's apt, for as live albums go, this is one of the strangest and one that practically screams contractual obligation offering. Culled from their 1976 summer tour, where they were joined by Carolyn Willis, it doesn't contain any of their hits. Not even their 1976 single duet with Willis, Get Closer, their biggest ever hit. Not that you know it in 2022, but it equaled the number 6 peak of Summer Breeze and Diamond Girl, while having the longest run on Billboard of any of them by some distance, a whopping 26 weeks, which is really insane for back then. But is instead mostly split between some pretty decent live updates of obscure early tunes and new material, including a trio of instrumentals, 2 quick fiddle hog-calling tunes to end the album, with a 9-minute jazz fusion piece that is totally unexpected from these guys, but also pretty memorable. Unlike the song I'm actually having you listen to, it would not be all that unfair to say. It became their next single, but stalled at 58, while the album unsurprisingly ended their run of 6 consecutive gold or better selling albums. All right, I don't know what I'm going to think of this with that build-up. Baby, I'll Give It To You. Totally 70s sounding, right, to the max, like adult contemporary 70s sounding. It was okay for me. I didn't love it by any means, but, it's a very simplistic song. He's sorry for the things he did to her, but he's back. Or she's sorry for the things she did to him. He's back. Either way, baby, I'll give it to you, baby, I'll give it to you. No one can make me feel like you do. I just want you to know I done you wrong when I wasn't here. The nights were so long and I wanted you so, but now I'm begging and I'm begging you, please. And you got to hold me closer than you did before and all that good stuff. So, it was all right. Next up, we got Journey. The Party's Over, in parentheses, hopelessly in love from Captured in 1981. Joseph says, into the early 80s, and a little thing called MTV was just around the corner and set to mostly kill off live doubles, but there's still some life in them for now. There is another end-of-era bookend. This is another end-of-era book album. As founder, keyboardist, vocalist Greg Raleigh left at the end of the tour, it documents making room for Jonathan Cain, with whom they found total superstardom. Jonathan Cain, interesting cat right now. Wow. Though as with Mr. Diamond, more success doesn't necessarily equal better music, in my humble opinion, Joseph says. And he's right. The album did contain a new live song, Dixie Highway, which received some airplay as well. But this lone studio track, a rare Steve Perry solo composition showcasing him in full Sam Cooke impersonator mode, was recorded in between Raleigh's departure and Cain's arrival. In the early 70s, non-album singles were fairly common. Well, these days, if you have a one-off track looking for home, you just throw it out on streaming sites on its own. Exactly, man. In the 80s, your choices were more limited. Get it on a soundtrack or append it to a greatest hits or live album. That's the route Journey took, and although it only reached number 34, it's fairly astonishing to realize that at that point in time, that made it their third biggest hit to that point, and popular encore on the first leg of the Escape Tour. Their next 14 singles would all land within the top 25 and relegate this one to relative obscurity, sadly. Wow, next 14 singles going to the top 25. So a couple things here. Yes, Joseph says it so well. I try to tell people that way. Man, it wasn't, in the old days, you couldn't just throw a single out there, right? You had to have something to do with it. That's why sometimes you even see so-called concept albums have a song or two thrown on there because they had to put them somewhere that didn't really fit the concept. Secondly, I think Steve Perry's absolutely fantastic. I know some people mock him, this or that. He's one of the greatest voices in rock history. Now, you might not like the songs, you might not like this, but you cannot argue Perry's greatness. I mean, I guess you could, but this is a one-way conversation because you can't talk back to me. Party's Over, Hopelessly in Love. I thought some good guitar work on there, and, you know, Steve just being Steve. I thought it was a pretty good song. I've never heard this song, so I'm really glad he brought it on here. I don't know, man. I just hear the instrumentation. I hear Steve's voice. It just takes me back to a time and place, right? So I don't know how objective I can be on it, even though I've never heard it. It just takes me back to being really young, you know, 10 years old in Omaha, Nebraska, listening to this where life was much more simple. It wasn't exactly fun. I didn't exactly have a great upbringing, but most of us didn't. But, you know, it just kind of takes you back to a long time ago. And I know you're looking at me thinking, man, this guy's still super young, but I'm really not. Looks are deceiving. JK, right? So I enjoyed that one, man. Well, now we're going to reach the halfway mark of this because it's 11 songs. It's a 10+1. This is the 6th song. Remember, Joseph said they're not ranked in order or anything. We have Crosby, Stills, and Nash, War Games, something that I did not know existed. What did I just say about getting a new song on a soundtrack? Joseph says, well, that's what CSN almost did with this track, ostensibly the title song to the 1983 film of the same name. It was featured in trailers and the music video, which we're watching here since it gives a bit more context. Features a young Matthew Broderick, which is never a bad thing. Was made up entirely of clips from the movie, but then it was dropped from the project at the 11th hour for mysterious legal reasons. It's a nifty little tune, though, and unfortunately it seems it and the film, which I've never seen, Joseph says, I've seen it, I went and saw it at the theater, seems to be relevant in 2022. The single was a minor success, reaching number 45. It was dropped from CSN's history as swiftly as it was from the film, it seems, never appearing on any of their compilations, though it did make its way onto Stills' box set in 2013. The liner notes for the album helpfully explain the inclusion of this and another studio track, Raise a Voice, on a live album as being they're recorded live in the studio, which you can't argue with that on any song, right? Okay, they did have pro studio help from the likes of Danny Korchmer and Jeff Porcaro, so maybe it isn't that big a stretch. What is more of a stretch is to call it a CSN song, because Crosby's nowhere near it. The 1982 CSN album Daylight Again began life as a Stills and Nash duo project before Ahmet Ertegun intervened to insist Crosby be included. But he'd gone even further off the rails by now, and there was no way the other two were going to go to the pain of attempting to work with him. Then again, Uncle Neil isn't on Our House or Teach Your Children, and those singles were credited as CSNY. So there's a level of consistency at least. Can't argue that. We're going to check out this video, which from the movie, I just got to bet it's got to be glorious. But I got to tell you, back in 1982 watching War Games, I went to the theater and saw it as a 10-year-old in the summer. I wouldn't have turned 11 yet. I was like, oh, wow, this is scary stuff. Little did I know how scary all this would truly eventually be. Okay, Crosby, Stills and Nash, or really just Stills and Nash, but we'll call them CSN. War Games. It was okay of a song, you know. I don't know, man. I don't know what I think of Stills and Nash with this 80s sort of synth and sound, but that was the sound then, so you got to go with the masses, right? I was enthralled by the video. Like, I don't remember this movie at all, right? I watched it in the theaters, and I'm sure I rented it on videotape or watched it on HBO, you know, a few years later, but I don't remember any of it. I kind of like to go back and watch it now and see, like, is this ridiculous, or was this clairvoyant almost? So, yeah, I mean, I liked seeing the movie clips in there. Can you stop your instincts? Can you man your thought control, sir? Can you give the last command or lie to a good soldier? I'm a doubter, I'm a fool, but a man. Cast me out or let me be all that I am. I am not so sure what you want from me. Either your machine is a fool for me. So it just kind of goes on from there. So interesting that CSN would create the theme to War Games. Just to me, that seems kind of strange, but all right. Well, next up, we have a song I actually know. Pat Benatar, Love is a Battlefield, from Live from Earth in 1983. Joseph says, well, we've had a few minor chart entries, but here's a bona fide smash, probably Pat's biggest single and certainly one of her signature songs. And I'm going to guess the only song here you're already familiar with. Look at this, man. Joseph knows me quite well. So to find it tucked away at the back end of a live album is something of a surprise. Really not sure why they didn't hold it over for her next album, but I guess it worked out okay. Nicely timed to tie in with her November 2022 Hall of Fame induction too, which is next month when I'm filming this, but it is this month while you're watching it. Love is a Battlefield, the great Pat Benatar song I am very familiar with. I can see the music video as it is playing. So I would say that she definitely became known in the U.S. before this. Her second album, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, was everywhere, man. And then this album after this one, I think, was We Belong, which is also a big hit, a definite different change in music for her there. But yeah, man, I like this song. I mean, I always liked it. I never loved it. But Pat's a very talented artist. So a very good inclusion here by Joseph. All right, we got 4 songs left because remember, this is a top 10 plus one. We got the great Harry Chapin, which Joseph's brought some stuff of Harry's. She is always 17 from Greatest Stories Live in 1976. Joseph says, I'd like to give a shout out to me about now because, man, sometimes I have these sweet little segues that would go totally unnoticed if I didn't point them out. So here I close the studio portion of the list by returning us effortlessly to a familiar live album from the mid-70s, which will be our time period of choice for the remaining live tracks, via the guy who cast our previous artist, then unknown in his community theater musical, The Zinger in 1976, and encouraged her to go in a more rock direction. Talking about Pat Benatar, it helped her get discovered. I won't go into the story, but I actually did read the story. Anyway, enough with the self-praise. Oh, come on, Joseph. I mean, keep going, man. Hey, if I don't do it, who else is gonna? I mean, and that's probably what you've had to live by your entire life, and I get it. As you might remember from when I had you review the live portion of GSL, it closed with a trio of studio tracks, of which this is my favorite, and is a fine way to get 15 years of American social history in a shade over 4 minutes. All 3 new songs were left over from the sessions for Harry's 1975 Portrait Gallery album, and frankly, all 3 should have made it to that album in the first place. Side 2 of PG contains several of his worst songs by a margin. Harry would later issue a second live double, Legends of the Lost and Found, subtitled New Greatest Stories Live, which would actually contain 10 new songs amongst the 16 tracks. Wow. 3 of which were significantly expanded from their studio versions, which I figured ruled it ineligible for inclusion. You figured right, under my own loose rules. But either way, I'd have gone with this one. The great Harry Chapin. She is always 17. Fantastic songwriting, as you would expect from Harry. And as Joseph said, just a great history lesson. You know, in verse 1, it's 1961 when we went to Washington. She put her arms around me and said, Camelot's begun, 1961. John F. Kennedy takes office as president of the United States. He's elected November 60, but should take office the next year, January of 61. We listened to his visions of how our land should be. We gave him our hearts and minds to send across the sea. And then verse 2, 1963, white and black upon the land. She brought me to monuments and made us all join hands. Scarcely 6 months later, she held me through the night. And when we heard of what had happened in that brutal Dallas night, which I live in a northern Dallas suburb, I mean, Dealey Plaza, where John F. Kennedy Jr. was assassinated, is approximately 25 minutes that way, right behind me. And then, of course, so she's always 17. She has a dream that she will lend us, and a love that we can borrow. There's so much joy inside her. She will even share our sorrow. She's our past, our present, and our promise of tomorrow. Oh, she's truly the only one. Oh, truly, she's the only one hope I've seen. And she is always 17. 1965, they're marching again from the burning cities against a crazy war. We bled through 68, went up to Woodstock, started out the 70s living off the land. Then the chorus again, 72, I'm at the end of my rope, but she's picketing the White House, right? Richard Nixon would have been president at that time, chanting truce the only hope. In 1975, when the crooked king was gone, Nixon resigned. She was feeding starving children, saying the dream must go on. And then that chorus again, so just a really well done song. Next up, we actually have to go over to YouTube for this one. It's not a video though. This one isn't, it's just audio. But we got Joni Mitchell, Love or Money from Miles of Aisles in 1974. Joseph says, now back to actual live performances with a pair of tunes recorded at the same venue, the beautiful Universal Amphitheater, as our next artist would put it, within mere weeks of each other in August of 1974. First is one I never heard until Osmond, one of our other patrons, brought his Joni series to the channel a while back. So Joni Mitchell top 10 songs through different time periods. I have Joni's first 10 studio albums, but not this fine live double. So props to him for bringing this one to my attention in the first place. Love or Money, the great Joni Mitchell. Of course, the writing is top notch, instrumentation, horns, everything on here. She sounds really good as well. The writing is definitely next level. It starts out first verse. It's the guy, the firmament of Tinseltown is strung with tungsten stars. Lots of 40-watt successes. So everybody's trying to be a star in Hollywood, right? 40-watt success. Okay, I'm kind of getting there. He says, where's my own shining hour? He's the well-kept secret of the underground. He's in debt to the company store because his only channeled aspiration was getting back that girl he had before. He's got stacks and stacks of words that rhyme, describing what it is to lose. He's got some just for laughs. He's got some for love, the main line to his blues. Some to shed a little light on you and me. Some to shed a little light on the human story. So a lyricist, right? A lyricist or a screenwriter, I would say a lyricist. And it just kind of goes on from there playing this story out. But one that I didn't know because I didn't react to that Joni Mitchell list. And Trey and I don't watch each other's videos because we don't have the time to do that. But yeah, man, good choice there. All right, we still got 2 songs left. John Denver, Annie's other song from An Evening with John Denver in 1975. Joseph says, yes, that's really what this is called. Just 3 songs earlier is a decent rendition of Annie's song, or Annie's first song, as it should really have become known. No? Okay. But this is equally lovely, if not even more so, and connects with me a lot more personally, Joseph says. Nobody has ever really filled up my senses, Annie's song. Maybe because I only have about 2 senses that actually work. When I'm away from home and are heading back home, I can honestly say I often have this song's chorus playing in my head. Definitely an obscure track from Mr. Denver that deserves more attention and a much better title. All right, Annie's other song. I thought that was fantastically done. I can see why Joseph sings the chorus on the way home. I think that John sounds great here. You get a real glimpse into his talent. Like I said, I don't know a lot of his stuff, man. I know he's so highly acclaimed by people who loved him back in the day, but he doesn't get brought up a lot nowadays. And retrospectively, he's not one of the guys that gets brought up, and I really think he should. Just so well done. Like Joseph said, it does need another name. Now, if you're scoring at home, and I'm sure you are, that's 10 songs, but remember, this is 10 plus 1. So we got one more going. We got Wings and the song Soily from Wings Over America in 1976. Joseph said, prior to compiling this list, I never even bothered to even wonder what the lyrics to this were. Certainly, there was never able to decipher many of them in the pre-internet days. I hear you on stuff like that. Where I was listening to the full triple album most weeks growing up. Wow. I'm kind of sad that I now know just how truly atrocious they are. Paula is flat out dumbest, but it kind of doesn't matter. Even if you can see why this one would work live, but it wasn't worth including on a studio album. It's suitably rousing. So dumb, yes, but also fun. It probably worked better as an opener than the encore it later became. If I was in the audience, I'd have been hoping for Junior's Farm to close the show, given it was the only big Wings hit missing from the set list, but oh well. I have a feeling this one might be a little rough for me. I love Paul. If you watch this channel, you know that, but his post-Beatles stuff can be real hit or miss for me, and lyricism sometimes is just cringeworthy. This sounds like it's going to be right there, so let's check it out. All right, Soily. But an energetic live performance. The lyrics are absolutely trash. It's fine, man. I mean, it's not going to be on my favorites. It's Paul bringing, Wings bringing some good instrumentation. I mean, Paul sounds pretty good. I'll leave that one right there. Now we'll get to my favorite tracks. I know you already know which one isn't going to be on there. Honorable mentions, the very first song, Neil Diamond, Lordy. Also, Harry Chapin, She Is Always 17. Faves are going to be Foy Vance, Concerning the Horizon. Journey, of course, The Party's Over, Hopelessly in Love. And John Denver, Annie's Other Song. So, man, I really enjoyed this. This was really well put together by Joseph. Not that I'm surprised by that, but just a lot of really good songs on here. Let me know what you think here. Like, what are your favorites from this list? What else would you include that are on live albums? Remember, they don't got to be live songs. They can be studio tracks on live albums. So once again, thank you for joining me. Until next time, guys, I will see you.